Okay, I couldn't see, I couldn't unmute. I was like, I can't do anything here. Can you hear me, Joe?
I can.
Whew. I was like, okay, maybe let's just go out and come back in. We will give everybody a few minutes. I gotta try to see who is on. Do a quick roll check. I'm going to give everybody a few minutes. Let me just, I don't see everybody just yet, so I want to give them a few minutes before we get started. Let's see me. We are actually waiting for 3 members of our work group to join that I have not seen. And Joe, maybe I missed them, but I don't see Crystal. John Mercer from District 1. And Captain Brown.
That is who I also see is missing. I think everybody else is here.
Hey Joel, John Murphy told me he said he couldn't get in. I tried telling him once, but I don't know if it worked. He said he didn't have no link to be able to join.
Let me give me 1 second because I think Chuck just got in. He was having the same problem. So let me email. Okay, Pete, I just emailed John the link that I think should be working.
Okay, we'll give him a minute or two. And did Crystal accept the meeting request? Do you know?
Looks like she's having the same issue. So
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if we did an update to the system because when I first initially tried to log on, it asked me to approve an extension or something.
yeah.
I was like, okay, I see John joined us. So we'll leave a few minutes for those technical difficulties. Give it a few minutes. Captain Brown was able to join, so Crystal may be in a second.
Hello. My camera is on, but for some reason I'm not showing as live. Is that what everybody else is seeing? Is Captain?
Yep, we can't see you. We see your name, but we can't see you. But I had the same issue when I logged in initially, and I had to log out and log back in.
Yeah, because I went through quite a few steps that were unusual to me, so I can try that if you like. Because initially it was Major Landsman that was on here, and I had to go through some different steps to take him out and put myself in. So do we have a few minutes when we try that again, or?
You got a minute to try. We're waiting for Crystal to join as well.
Okay.
Crystal, we see you able to get in now.
Deandra, can you hear me now?
I can.
Oh, okay. I just
Yeah.
sent Joel an email saying that I had to resort to my iPad and then it wasn't letting me unmute or
Yeah.
start the video. So let me see if I can do that. Let me close this and see if I can start this. Here I am. Okay. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh,
We
okay,
can't
good.
see you, but I can hear you, but that's fine.
You can't see me?
No, but I think it's something with the system because Captain Brown just tried to log out and he's trying to log back in. There you go.
Okay. Okay.
There you
Yeah, I
go.
tried doing it from the county laptop, but it wasn't letting me on at all. And that's
Yeah.
strange because it lets me on the last time and it's let me on other meetings. Anyway, technology. Sorry about that, everybody.
No, it's fine. We're waiting for Captain Brown. We're gonna give one more minute and then we're
Okay.
gonna get started because we probably got a hard stop at. It's scheduled until 4, but if we could stop at 3:45 because I got to try to get on council by 4. So I need a few minutes before then so I don't run into this situation.
Right. Okay. Okay.
All right. Well, it's 2:40. So, okay, here we go. Captain Brad, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. For some reason, my camera is still not working, and trust me, it is on, but I guess it's just not showing up for some reason. But I'm ready when you are.
Okay. We've all had that problem today. Several of us, let me say, have had that problem today. So it's okay. We're glad you're able to join us. So thank you all for joining us again. I'd like to move to officially open the meeting, and I think are we recording now, Joel?
Yes, we are.
Okay, perfect. So I'd like to officially open the meeting and thank you all for joining us again and being willing to be a part of this task force as mentioned before. Joel sent out an agenda to you all earlier this week. Well, it's today, Tuesday, maybe a couple of days ago. He sent out an agenda to you all to let you all know what we would be covering. But before we get started, I just wanted to let you all know a couple of things. Major Landsman is not with us today, but Captain Brown is with us today. You heard him on the call. And I also wanted to give our Representative Ron from District 7 an opportunity, because at the last opening meeting, we all got a chance to introduce ourselves and tell everyone a little bit about ourselves. However, Ron, you did not get that opportunity, so I didn't want to skip over that. I wanted to give you that opportunity if your mic was working this time, if that's what you wanted to do.
Let me do this.
We can hear you now.
You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Ron Metzger. I am from Council 7. I apologize I wasn't here the last meeting. I was here, actually. I just couldn't be seen or heard. When I got a new monitor, IT forgot to put a cable on that I needed. But I heard everything that went on. I am legislative aide to Councilman Crandall in the 7th District. I grew up in this area. I know this area very well, and that's why I was asked to be here. So, as far as Dundalk, Essex, Edgemere, and Sparrows Point go, ask me anything you want to know.
Great, Ron. Welcome, and we appreciate you joining us. I also wanted to take some time to do some housekeeping before we get in. Make sure that you all mute your mics if you're not speaking, just so that we don't have any background. I wanted to, and as Joe mentioned in his email to everybody, leave more time for discussion during this task force meeting, because now we're going to begin to dig into the major things that we need to do in order to be able to deliver the reports. And in addition to that, I know that Joel mentioned it to you in the email, but as we're going throughout this process today to just try to give you some background on what we do at DPW in regards to putting up the signs, and a little bit about what Baltimore City has done, and just some background to help us start to think about this process, we want you all to think about the next steps for the work group. That was one of the things we asked you to think about before we actually started this meeting today. So as we go through it, because the very last part of this discussion really is going to depend on us deciding what should be on the next agenda and what the next step should be. So hopefully it'll be a back and forth and a good hearty feedback amongst all of us, so that we can build that next agenda, get some ideas for the next agenda and where we need to go with the next step. So I just wanted to remind you all of that, because I'm going to be looking for your feedback at the end of the agenda. So with that being said, we will move into the agenda. I believe the first part of the agenda is for me to give a little bit of background. And Joel, if you want to pull the agenda up, that's fine. I can talk over the agenda. The first part of the agenda today is for me to give an overview of our existing regulations and our restricted areas from the DPW perspective. Unless, before we get started, does anyone want to add anything to the agenda or make any suggestions before we get started? I should ask that of the group before we move forward. Okay, hearing nothing, we'll move right into the agenda. So I took a little bit of time to talk to our traffic group to try to document and be able to articulate to you all today just a little bit of overview about our existing regulations and what we actually do in DPW when a complaint comes in. We thought that the background information will be helpful as we move forward, so that if there's tweaks that we want to recommend to the program, we can get them from this group. It gives us a basis to start with. So initially, let me go. Initially, what happens when there is a complaint from residents about large trucks inappropriately using residential streets? We normally get the complaint, a written complaint, into our traffic engineering area. That complaint sometimes comes via a letter or just an email to our group. Once our group reaches out to the resident, we may ask for additional information, such as how many trucks do you see coming down a particular location on a particular day, the exact intersections of where the truck is coming from, things of that sort, so that we can get an idea of what they see. And we do that so that we can then go out and conduct a truck classification study to determine if there's actually a restriction that's needed. The group has a form that they use where they go out and they send a team out to do a study, maybe 1 or 2 people, to count how many trucks are actually coming down that particular road, the size of the trucks, and the frequency of the trucks coming down that road. Once they determine if there's a restriction, once they determine and pull all the information based on that, and they do that study for a couple of days. They don't just do it for one day, go out and count the trucks. They do it for a couple of days to try to see if there's a pattern there, right? Once they do that, if they find that there is justification for a restriction, they then go back and determine a more appropriate route for the trucks to take without doing without using undue hardship. Then they notify the complainant of the findings, and we issue a new regulation. A copy of the regulation goes to the county council for approval, and then a work order is issued so that we could post the appropriate signs. Typically, that process takes about 30 days to complete. One of the things you'll see as a follow-up is the locations of where we get the majority of our complaints. We built some maps for this presentation today. You'll see where some of those locations are that we get the majority of the complaints. And that's pretty much how the process goes. You can always find out from our regulations, the regulations that have been updated based on the complaints that have come in and based on where we have the no through signs. So hopefully that gives us a basis to move forward in something in the back of our head to plan what DPW currently does now. And if we as a committee want to make recommendations on things that DPW can do to strengthen the process as we go through this work group. So Joe, that's a little bit of the background on the restricted areas.
Can we ask, DeAndrea, can we ask some questions actually?
Sure.
So I'm a little bit confused because based on the complaints you guys get, right, it would seem to me that probably most of those complaints are on already restricted routes. Do we know if that's the case or not? Or because you mentioned how you kind of look into whether or not a restriction is appropriate. And so my understanding, right, of the problem that you guys are most commonly experiencing with residential traffic is that it's on a restricted route already. Is that a fair assessment or not an accurate understanding? Do we know?
So I would have to look at the data to see if the complaints that we're getting are on a restricted route already, or if the complaints are asking us to come out and see if this should be an
Restricted route. Okay.
But if it's on a restricted route already, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that is then kicked to another level. That's kicked to enforcement.
Okay. Because I think those are two, fundamentally different issues to address the problem, right? The conversation around trucks being operated on a route that they shouldn't be because it's restricted. We want to help you in any way, try and communicate and make sure that we're enforcing those restrictions. The piece around routes and whether or not they ought to be restricted is a little bit different conversation about where we need to make sure that we have access to if it's a viable route already. And that's one of the challenges. I know later on we're going to get into some conversations about Baltimore City, and that's one of the challenges we've experienced in Baltimore City as well. But I'll touch more on that maybe a little further. But I'd like to have a better understanding about the residential concerns and whether those are primarily, we don't like that this route is available to trucks, or if it's more, trucks shouldn't be on this route, they're restricted and they're violating the law, which certainly we want to help you out with.
Okay. And then in full, one of the questions I asked is that of the team, is there a one-stop shop where a trucker can go and look at our website and say, oh, these are the locations I can't go through?
Yeah.
There's not a one, so that's already an efficiency type area that we can probably help in
Yeah.
making sure there's a one-stop shop where somebody can actually go. Because if I wanted to know where all the locations were, because I wanted to make sure that my truckers didn't go down that location, I don't think there's one specific location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And I also, I believe that my chief of traffic is on the call. Greg, do you want to add anything to that conversation?
Yeah, I can chime in. This is Greg Karski, the Bureau Chief of Transportation. To answer your question, we get a mix of both. Got complaints that's already the route's established, and we also get ones where they want the truck route established there, prohibition. So it is a mix of both. I don't know if it's 50-50, 60-40, but it is a good mix.
So that's really good feedback. I appreciate that. So could we talk about maybe at a future meeting what goes into if the truck is a legal route, if the route is a legal route today, and there is a push from the community to restrict that route, how is that evaluation done and what kind of goes into that analysis and determination? Because that's always a big challenge for us, right? When routes start to continue to get cut away and chipped away at, and we find fewer and fewer routes that are available, which previously were perfectly legal routes. So just understanding that and what goes into that analysis would be helpful.
Yeah, Andrea explained it very well. The only thing I would add to what she said is we'll go out and look for through trucks. We want to make sure that truck is from point A to point B, and it is in fact a legal truck, or would be a legal truck if it's posted that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Any other questions on that part? All right. Not hearing any. Joel, how about we go to the review of the community input?
Sure. So give me 1 sec to pull up PowerPoint here. And I will probably say this more than once, but the materials that I'm showing today will all be emailed to the work group after the meeting. So let me get this started here. All right, so basically what I'm going to go through now is what kinds of feedback we have to sort of base our decisions on, where our data comes from, and the big chunk of that is what we got from our community input survey. The survey is still open, and we are encouraging residents to continue taking it, but this was a representation of what the results showed as of last Wednesday, the 21st. So I broke it down by district here, and we know that we're charged with 2 pretty specific areas. And I also added in the small amount of emails we got to the truck traffic email. As you can see, we got a lot that did not fall in districts 1 and district 7. And I think that we, despite our initial task to address issues in districts 1 and 7, I think the volume of response shows that we need to think carefully about if and how to expand the scope of the program we are creating, whether that is here's our recommendations to be continued, or if that is widening the scope as we work to look at more locations. But we want to, clearly this is an issue for residents beyond districts 1 and 7, and we want to make sure those residents are being heard and that we're properly analyzing, if there are areas that need this type of attention. For districts 1 and 7, we went through the data and found the streets and areas that were most commonly mentioned as issues for folks. There was a very open form in the survey, so folks had a lot of ways to give their feedback. So this is District 1. You'll see that there's one that stands out, which Benson Avenue had 9 complaints in the survey, and the others here only had a handful. I'm going to show you this on a map in a minute or two, so you won't have to worry about memorizing this, but just as a quick overview there. And then in terms of Benson Avenue, this is a quote from what Major Landsman, our police department work group rep, sent to us. Most persistent complaint is Benson Avenue between Sulphur Spring Road and the I-695 overpass. This 2/3 of a mile stretch from Benson Avenue is residential and is flanked by many commercial industrial areas. So, well, I won't read the whole thing out loud, but I think it's clear that there's one particular area that is on the highest level of concern on this side of the county. Not to say that there aren't others of concern, but this was the one that stood out in the survey. Moving on to District 7, there were a lot more responses in this one, so you'll see a lot more roads here. And because of that volume, I didn't include anything that got less than 3 responses. I want to ensure any constituents who are watching that does not mean those responses don't count and that we won't look at those areas. Just trying to be brief here and give you an overview. And as you'll see on the map that I'll put up in a minute, this sort of covers a central quarter in Dundalk, sort of moving, starting at the Amazon Center and moving east over to Wise Avenue and then down through historic Dundalk and Turner Station. So that is this. You can see different points of Solace Point Road, a lot of complaints, and then a lot of these other ones are around that same area, with the exception of Eastwood, is a little further north. But and then Trade Point Atlantic signage, while not a road, was a big thing that came up a few times for some folks who answered the survey. And I wanted to put this up. This is what Bron sent us as constituent input that his office has received. In a way, he's been collecting this type of survey data informally for a much longer time than we have. And so a lot of what he has overlaps with what we saw in the survey. But I wanted to include it because I think that his input is very valuable in knowing what the community is thinking and hearing. So with that, I'm going to pull down the PowerPoint, and I will pull up 2 maps here. Here we go. So, let me see. Are folks still seeing the slideshow, or are you seeing the map?
I can see the map now, Joel.
Okay. All right. I think there we go. So this is a zoomed in on District 1. And I'll explain the legends off screen right now, but I'll explain these lines real quick. But I just wanted to show you that these are the representations of the different roads that were cited in the PowerPoint that I just had up. And then most of them were down in this Halethorpe, Arbutus area, and then a handful were up here towards Catonsville. Give me 1 second, sorry. So anything highlighted in any color here represents a restricted route in this district. The purple one, so we put these together using information from both the police department and the public works department. And we asked them for hotspots, essentially. Where are they getting the most complaints to their respective departments? So purple is, you can see Benson Avenue here. represents one where both departments declare that a hotspot. Blue over here, you can see, is one that the police department found to be a hotspot. Yellow, I don't think we have any on screen, but we have a lot in District 7 for ones that DPW found. And then anything orange is just a regular restricted route that didn't necessarily meet the threshold of hotspot for them, but certainly came about because those roads were determined to be not eligible for truck traffic or prohibited for truck traffic. So again, I will send this out afterwards, but I just wanted a little visual representation. And then District 7, there's a lot more to see here. So again, that yellow is DPW, and purple is both departments, blue is police. And you can see what I was sort of talking about here in this central quarter, up, from Delaware down to the Turner Station down south here, and then some areas up here in Essex, or closer to Essex as well. So that is our sort of the conglomeration of what we have from those three sources of the survey, the police, and DPW. And again, I think this will be helpful for you to look at in hand. I can also send out the actual raw data of the survey results, and those are a little messy, but you can see where I got all these conclusions from in case you're curious to go dive into the data. But that is my overview. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Hey, Joel, I'll ask a question. It's Lewis again. Is there a way to quantify what triggered it being labeled as a hotspot? I mean, I know you've color-coded it in a sense so that we have a sense of who might have identified it as a hotspot, but there are different levels, obviously, of complaints that are generated. And it would seem that wanting to prioritize the areas that are the most egregious challenges, right, would be the ones that would be the primary targets. I'm not sure if I'm not clear if that's already represented here or if it's not.
I think it's represented very informally in that it's sort of divided into hotspots and not hotspots. But I think we would have to go back to the departments to get their take on what allowed them to make that determination. I have Major Landsman's write-up that I need to go back and review exactly what he said, but I think Greg or DeAndre, can either of you speak to DPW's answer to that?
Sure, I can chime in a little bit. Traditionally, the one on Wise Avenue, the ones off of Dundalk Avenue, and the one on the other side on Benson Avenue are like the three biggest ones we hear about. They're really ones that we should target for this, in my opinion.
And from an OCE standpoint, I would agree with Mr. Karski. As far as the Office of Community Engagement, they're the three roads that we hear the most complaints on.
Louis, does that answer your question? I think you wanted to know where the complaint, how did we determine that they were hotspots? It's based on the number of complaints that have come into us about those areas.
Yeah, and wanting to know which ones were the highest profile areas, right? I think that's an important thing to understand so that we can target those areas that have the most egregious, number of violations for analysis. So, and I'm not surprised about Benson. John and I had a really good conversation. And I actually reached out to UPS after the last meeting because of Benson and Wise. I know at one time Wise was a legal route and I believe, was rescinded several years ago. and understand that it's still a problem. And then we're familiar with the challenges on Dundalk, certainly. So I'm not surprised by you guys telling me that those are the ones where you get the most complaints.
As a follow-up, I think, do you think that when we get closer to our actual decision making, which I think we're sort of have started that process now, that a relative ranking of the top spots from those departments would compare? So even if we don't have huge amounts of data quantifying everything that's saying these three are the top, and then it's this one is 4, this one is 5. Do you think that would be helpful to you guys?
So it would be helpful from our standpoint because, I've got to justify to our members, hey, we agree that these are the locations that primarily are where there's justification for putting in cameras. And so understanding that, and, certainly we don't want to see cameras everywhere. And so making sure that we are prioritizing appropriately helps me to justify that to our members, that the data shows that this is where, we have the greatest number of violations, and, we want to help be part of that, the solution to that problem. So, yeah. It also allows me the ability to reach out to certain industry segments, particularly there in District 7, since you have the map up right now, right, where we know that a lot of that is port driven. And so we can also work cooperatively with, groups like the MPA to push out messaging and the like there. So, yeah.
And I'll also say that this is a general time for discussion on all of what DeAndrea and I just went over. So if other folks don't necessarily want to respond to that, but have other things to comment on, please feel free to jump in.
So Joe, let me just ask a question of Ron and John, since this is primarily focused on District 1 and District 7. Are you surprised about the areas of complaints, or do you have any feedback on these specific areas, since these are districts that you all are representing?
One thing I can tell you that I've been monitoring traffic flow. I did 3 counts yesterday, 3 different hours. I did 1 count this morning, and I'm still way up there on numbers of trucks. I counted only dual wheel trucks. I didn't count the Sprinter vans or anything smaller, ladder rack trucks or anything this morning. I just counted all dual wheel trucks or bigger. Monday lunchtime in an hour, I got 21 trucks. Monday 6 to 7, I got 16 trucks. And even Monday 9:40 last night, I got 3 trucks. This morning, I got 25 trucks between 7 and 8.
So we're right on target in terms of the areas of focus, in your opinion.
So definitely Benson Avenue is definitely one of the hot spots.
Okay. Were there other, was it a possibility that there were other areas in District 1, John, that we missed, that we maybe don't get complaints about, that the community has talked about, that you are aware of, that were not on these maps?
When I go to the Halethorpe improvement meetings, I haven't heard anybody else complain about any truck traffic anywhere. Mostly speeding cars.
Okay, thank you. That's good feedback. Ron, did we hit did the map effectively articulate the areas of concern in District 7, in your opinion, from a community perspective?
It did. Do you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me? It did, but I want to say that we're in a kind of a unique location. We're centered between the Port of Baltimore and Trade Point Atlantic, so we get a stream of 18-wheelers that come through. Wise Avenue, yes, is definitely a hot spot. Well, I have 1 or 2 others, but let me say this. I believe a lot of the problem is truckers taking shortcuts. They know it's wrong. They're not supposed to be on that route. There's clear signage, nothing over 3/4 ton. They take advantage of that situation because it seems our local police will not pull them over to check a manifest. They just automatically assume they have a delivery, say, on Wise Avenue, which they do not until they get all the way to the end of Wise by North Point Boulevard. They have some deliveries. They're not supposed to be on Wise. They're supposed to go around, and that would be Peninsula Expressway to North Point Boulevard and come back to maybe a half a block of Wise. But they're doing this as a shortcut. I also believe there might be maybe a few cases that GPSs are giving bad information. Possible. But I know they're taking shortcuts, and that needs to be stopped, in my opinion, by cameras and or enforcement.
Okay. Good feedback. Good feedback. Any other questions or comments on that section of review?
Good afternoon. This is Captain Brown. I am very familiar with problems in Dundalk. I was the captain there for close to 3 years, and I back then Great Point Atlantic wasn't really it was in its infancy stages, and but the port has become a problem for years. It has been Clare Road, but trucks are continuing. Wise Avenue was an issue back then. It's become more of an issue now, especially with Great Point Atlantic. A lot of like some trucks are cutting through, but some of them are local deliveries. And I think what we did talk about at one point was the trucks that are going down Wise that may be delivering to, areas that are towards the end of Wise before it makes a turn to North Point Boulevard. And I do think as much as, more regulation it is what it is, but I don't know how else to target that other than what Mr. Metzger indicated, because I'm not making excuses, but I mean, we have a lot of things going on in the police department, and the actual area of enforcement for trucks is very specialized. It really is. And we have one team that does the whole county. So we're down here when we can be, and we also have minimal officers that are trained in the Dundalk precinct as well. And there's traffic issues everywhere, and not just dealing with trucks. So this is a difficult issue. It's not something that's easily to target. So I do think out of the box thinking is not a bad idea here, and this is an unusual approach. But I know from experience, Dundalk is definitely an area that could, look into further for possibly this type of, system. That's all I have.
Captain Brown, what is the fee for through truck restriction?
I'm sorry?
What is the fine when you catch one of these trucks?
I honestly don't have to look it up, but it's I believe it's a very high fine, and I'll have to check and see whether or not that is. Again, I do think that some of these, when they do see enforcement, they go around other ways, which tells me there's other ways to go around. So, I think also, if we added people to our team, that would be, but again, it's something you constantly, be on, because you do it one day and then the next day they're there. So, I don't think lines are that great. I really don't. I can look them up. I'll try to look it up while I'm on the phone here, or while I'm on the call here.
Thank you.
So, Louis, from an industry perspective, to kind of prompt conversation, what was interesting to me that Captain Brown said is that he knows that it's because of the port area, and of course the trucks trying to get to the port through residential. So, as a part of the Maryland Truckers Association, there are other trucker associations that deal with issues that have large ports that are near residential areas that may deal with issues like this?
Well, it's not the same. Baltimore is somewhat unique in the location of our port and the proximity of housing and residential that has grown up around the port. So I won't suggest that it's not a problem in other areas. I'm not aware of any other jurisdictions outside of Baltimore City, and I'm talking about nationally, that have incorporated technology like this. But I know Delaware did get the authority, I believe, in the last year to use cameras for truck route enforcement. On the fine side, I have no doubt that what Mr. Metzger said is 100% true. There's two issues going on here. There's out-of-state drivers who don't regularly access the port, who are being directed through GPS, primarily through, the port is an overwhelmingly independent contractor community. That means that guy owns his truck. The company has no authority to tell him what routes to take, because then that ties into being an employee. And they can use that driver. They can tell him these are restricted routes and the like. They can choose not to use him if, they're getting citations are coming in and the like. But independent contract drivers really are just told, here's the load you have to pick up, when you have to pick it up, here's when you have to deliver it by. And everything else is up to them. At least 75% of the drivers that operate at the Port of Baltimore are independent contractors. They're also the ones who are least likely to have truck-specific GPSs. And so they are using Google Maps, Waze, car GPS systems, things of that sort that are not going to distinguish those kinds of route restrictions. So that is an ongoing challenge that we still have in the city as well. But certainly there is a very good number of them that I am certain are using cut-through routes, right? That's what they're doing. The independent contractor driver is the most difficult one to control. And the only way you're going to get that control is through more aggressive enforcement there, whether that be electronic or some other means.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that prompted a good discussion, I believe, on the restricted areas and the community input. I think it's important to move. We are at 3:20 on the calendar, so we're a little bit behind. I think it's important to move to the Baltimore City overview of the Baltimore City Commercial Vehicle Management Plan.
Can I just put a tail on what we were talking about and what Captain Brown said, that the truckers that are doing the cut through, and we only have one team for the whole county to look to overview. The problem is with that, every trucker's got a CB radio, and once they spot them, it goes out on the air, and they go other ways. So we need signage, we need enforcement, and we need cameras. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Joe, we'll go to the overview of Baltimore City's program.
Okay, can everybody see the map up on screen?
Mm-hmm.
What I'm going to tell you now represents my best understanding of Baltimore City's program based on some research and some conversations I've had with Baltimore City Department of Transportation employees. I know that Lewis was around when this system was created, so if I get anything wrong or misconstrue anything, I hope you'll mention that when you get to speak your piece. So what you see on screen is the truck route for Baltimore City. Before this existed, Baltimore City had a very piecemeal approach and just had a series of routes that were not effective as collectively. Large vehicles could still go down certain residential areas, and there wasn't a lot of rhyme or reason to where vehicle operators could go in terms of the bigger picture. So they kind of threw out the map altogether that they had started from scratch and really just work backwards from where do trucks need to be, what are the points of pickup and drop off, where are the commercial industrial areas in the city, and beginning and creating what you see as the red here. So the red are where trucks can be at any point, and you'll see the darker red are interstate highways. But really just the major roads and throughways to get them to where they need to be, and where it's appropriate for them to be on larger roads like North Avenue or Monument Street. So, and then they worked downward. They put together sort of an informal version of this work group, sort of an agency stakeholder group, and also did a lot of community outreach. One Department of Transportation employee I spoke with said she went to 65 community meetings over the course of a year. And they collected input and sort of processed things same way, similar to what we're doing here, to map out these blue and these green routes. So these blue routes are the local truck routes where it's appropriate for trucks to go when they're making a local delivery in the area. And the green routes are ones where they are restricted and not allowed after 7 p.m. through 7 a.m., but during the day from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., they're treated the same as these blue routes. And then once they had this map in place, they looked at the camera part of the program, and they followed the model, which I assume is what we're going to be doing for speed cameras and red light camera programs. You have a limited number of cameras, and those cameras are moved from time to time around different set enforcement locations. So I'm sure you've all seen driving past here or in the city or elsewhere where, sometimes you'll drive past a speeding camera location or a red light camera, and it won't go off when you thought it should have, and that's because the cameras are moved around from place to place, and that's the same type of thing that we're talking about here. So DOT set the initial enforcement locations, and then locations have been added since the program's establishment based on constituent feedback. And residents have a form that they can fill out where they ask the transportation department to examine a particular roadway or intersection as a potential enforcement corridor. So map changes aren't being made to this map, but places where cameras could be maybe added from time to time. And they have just one form that they use for that, for speed cameras and for red light cameras. And that's one of the things I'll share after this meeting is that form that they use. That's sort of the big picture. I just wanted to mention 3 quick things before I finish here. So each enforcement corridor where those cameras are requires 2 cameras, 1 for each direction. I think that's important to keep in mind when we make recommendations on the number of cameras, that 2 cameras means 1 enforcement location. Baltimore City's height monitoring systems, as I understand it, set their trigger height just above the height of an MTA bus. This helped them simplify many of the questions surrounding what type of vehicles should be exempt from enforcement, as the height of many vehicles in certain potential exempt categories, maybe package delivery or moving vehicles, for example, don't trigger the monitoring systems. So that's some food for thought for us. And then in terms of citation amounts, Baltimore City sends a warning for the first offense, $250 for the second offense, and $500 citation for third and subsequent offenses. So I will finish up there, and then we'll save questions until after Lewis and Jeff have a chance to speak on this. But I will pull this down, and then we can give them the floor. All right. Whenever you guys are ready.
Jeff, you mind if I just jump in, or you want to kick off?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Louis.
So, and actually, Joel, I think unless they changed their violation rate, I think it's 125 and 250 for the violations, but perhaps I'm mistaken. But yes, they all have an initial warning, certainly. So, just a few things about Baltimore City, because Jeff and I were both really involved in that entire process. So, on the really good side, I think one, they definitely worked with us extensively. I mean, literally, we had a meeting with 15 people, probably 4 meetings, because we went quadrant by quadrant, looking at all of the routes and these massive layouts of the city to identify, what routes we absolutely had to make sure were preserved and we had access to based on industrial locations and key points. And ultimately, what the city did with regards to the color coding of the map, I think, is very useful and could be very useful for the county also, particularly as it might provide an opportunity to integrate with the city, right, where there's so many connected roadways. So I would encourage you guys to look at that. And it is really easy to tell, okay, these are the routes that I'm allowed on. And conceptually, I'm on one of these routes until I get to the closest intersection where I have to exit that route to actually make my delivery. So if my delivery point is on a restricted area, then I, get to that closest intersection, and then I obviously am allowed to vacate one of those routes. And I think that's important because it's a lot easier to color code the routes that you can be on than the routes that you can't be on, and a lot easier to see. Originally, the map was only in PDF format, which was brutal from a user standpoint. Now it's in a GIS format online, which is better and easier to zoom in on specific areas and find out where are the legal routes. I'll talk a little bit more about that though on some of the downside. And there was a tremendous amount of signage that was put up on the existing routes. Or on the truck routes, designating those as truck routes. And lastly, without a doubt, I think, Joel, you were talking about Valerie did a huge amount of community outreach. I know Jeff and I both did a number of meetings with her, with the communities, to talk about what trucks were legally allowed and why they were legally allowed in certain areas and what areas would be less appropriate. All that on the good side. On the bad side, so one of the big challenges we have had is the lack of a consistent process for rezoning efforts and efforts to take truck routes off of the list. And that has become a challenge at the whim of legislators who, because of developments along key truck routes, they suddenly want to redesignate those routes and no longer allow trucks on them. And that can create a real challenge for us. We did come to an agreement with the city. We supported the city's cameras. We supported it at the city council level. We supported it at the state level. But with that agreement, that 6 cameras was the maximum as long as they were mobile. The city wanted mobility, and we agreed to that. Sadly, you get new legislators in and they don't want to abide by that agreement. And now they want to lift all restrictions on the number of cameras and just open it up incredibly, which poses great problems for us because then you handcuff a company by having to prove every single time that it's on a route if you have unlimited expansion of cameras. There is a lot of inconsistent terminology with the city about abatement, and we saw abatement rates over 60% that first came out of the city. And when I say abatement, it's not clear from the city, does that mean violations that they dismiss before they ever go to court? They recognize that the company should not have gotten a violation, or is that after a potential court hearing that violation is then waived as a result? But the abatement rate has been very high, and the city has used that term very inconsistently with regards to how they're dismissing legal operation. There is not a verifiable process for a company to pre-clear if it's going to be operating in neighborhoods or if it's the type of truck that frequently operates in neighborhoods. The most common example being a UPS or FedEx package delivery vehicle. We understand, right? Tractor trailers, I said last meeting, okay, I get tractor trailers, particularly containerized cargo, should really never be in your neighborhoods. But what the city says, oh, just call us up and we put you on the quote unquote hot list. Well, that's not really a consistent process for how a company might demonstrate that it should legally be allowed to operate in certain neighborhoods. There's no electronic process for a company to file a request to rescind a violation. And one of our biggest concerns, actually, that ties back to something you mentioned, Joel, is on the GPS side. So one of the guarantees that the city had given us when we supported it was that they were going to get the map on the major GPS providers, and that simply has not happened. I mentioned the camera issue, the signage issue. The city did a great job with putting up signs that say truck route, for example, on the designated truck routes. What they also had planned to do was a signage inventory around all of the no 3/4 ton signs, and they never really did that and updated or replaced some of those signs. And then the last thing that I had concerns about with the city was specific to one location, which was that they have a camera at the 1700 block of Fayette Street. And, we actually got a complaint from UPS that had to deal with deliveries to Johns Hopkins. And Johns Hopkins has a different receiving address versus the manifest address that is on all of the paperwork, but all Hopkins deliveries are directed to this certain other address. And so we pointed out to the city that, in fact, if you moved your camera by 1 block, that would address this problem, because we have trucks making legal deliveries who can't prove it because their manifest says something else. And the city, I put that in at least 3 years ago, and the city has not moved that camera. It's still there today. When if they move that camera 1 block, it would make the problem go away. So there are some challenges where they have lacked some flexibility with those kinds of modest adjustments, and those have been some of our bigger concerns that we hope to avoid in the county. So I don't know if Jeff has anything else he wants to add.
Thank you, Louis. A lot of information. I think you hit the nail on the head. In the interest of time and interaction, I feel that I could best help out in agenda item 7 and provide maybe some feedback or some answers to some questions about what you talked about.
All right. With that, does anybody else have any questions for Louis based on his observations from the Baltimore City program? Feedback.
I have a couple more statements about Benson Avenue.
Okay.
One thing is that I went up on the 695 on the outer loop and drove down to UPS past my house. And then I went up on the 695 outer loop and drove on Caton Avenue and 95 and Caton Avenue to Joe Avenue and back to UPS. It was 1 minute difference in time. So the people that are cutting through my area are saving 1 minute on their route. And so there is another way for them to do. Also, my signs in front of the house have been here probably 40 years. And so it's nothing new for anybody to learn. It's before the railroad crossing was closed at Connect Avenue 40 years ago, probably. So that was the other alternative. Also, when they built 95 in 1970, they put an underpass under 95 at the end of Connect Avenue it was supposed to take the traffic out of Benson Avenue industrial area over to Commerce Drive on Washington Boulevard. They deleted that part of the road. It's still unpaved underneath, and they built the medical center in front of it up on Commerce Drive, so it'll never be used anyway. But that's it was originally supposed to take the traffic off of the upper end of commercial end of Benson Avenue. So it really threw everybody down Benson Avenue past my house. That's all.
Okay. Good feedback.
I have a quick question.
Sure, Pete. That's
Going-
Pete, right?
No, Ron,
I'm sorry, Ron. Go ahead.
thank you. Going back to cameras, quickly, do the cameras that issue violations also issue points? I know it's cars they don't, and I'm guessing they do not with trucks. But if that's the case, then is the DOT informed of the infraction?
No, it's a civil citation only, so it's purely a fine. And honestly, Ron, they're very effective. I mean, additional levels of enforcement, if you look at what has happened in the jurisdictions where the cameras have been effectively placed in Baltimore City, for example, right outside of St. Helena. I did ride-alongs in St. Helena where they absolutely had a problem with port traffic, cutting through. And when they put that camera in, they went down to 0.
It's good to know. Thank you. And as you may already have guessed, we share St. Helena, city and county. So I'm aware of what you're talking about. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions about the presentation on Baltimore City's commercial vehicle management plan? All right. Hearing none, we're up to the point of, that was the open discussion point of the agenda where we discussed Baltimore City's vehicle management plan. So nobody has any questions or suggestions or other questions about Baltimore City? I know, Joel, for me, how else did they advertise the maps to the trucking community so that they would know that these maps were out there? I heard you say that they go out and they do, their person did a lot of outreach to the communities, but how did they give it to the truckers? How did they make sure that the truckers knew? Did you have any of that feedback from them?
I might punt that to Lewis. I'm not sure the answer to that.
Yeah, I'll jump in on there. So I know that we did a huge push on it. In fact, we still push it out occasionally as a reminder. I'm sure Jeff with the Baltimore Industrial Group, we definitely used the port as well because they have their e-modal broadcast system in addition. And then I would describe it as more targeted, strategic, where, I might get a complaint about a particular company and then start going direct to that company about, this is the complaint, here's the Baltimore City map. If you have issues with it or concerns about, where you're trying to access, then you need to go to this office in the city to determine what is the viable route that you should use. So, yeah.
So you're right, and worked a ton over the past 10 years to encourage safe freight movement through Baltimore City. And we relied on that notion that our out this truck map were going to be uploaded to the major GPS providers so that we would in fact have a 24-hour-a-day system encouraging trucks to take the right path to their destination, as opposed to us being human beings trying to get the message out over and over and over again. If we had this map uploaded to the major GPS providers such as Waze or Google Maps, I think that it would make a tremendous impact on the reduction of trucks throughout all of the jurisdictions on roads that they shouldn't be on. And then I also don't want to overlook, Ron, habitual problem areas. I'm a truck driver myself. We typically model our behavior after water, and that we look for the path of least resistance and the least expensive path. So you will find that, particularly in District 7, if they haven't done anything about the reduction of tolls or making it a zero toll at 695 in Broning, that's a popular area to jump the toll and bypass that $24 fee to get to your destination over at Port Covington. So that's the reason that the Baltimore Industrial Group, along with the Maryland Motor Truck Association, supported the bill to help with enforcement in those real problem areas to help change the behavior of the truck drivers or the freight carriers. But
Jeff, I'm
in
so
my
glad.
opinion, it really comes down to, having a strong vision for the county, like Lewis said, interconnecting or working with Baltimore City to make sure that things are seamless. If there's adjustment that needs to be made on the city side, we could look at that together. And then at the end of the day, we have to make sure that this information gets uploaded into the GPS systems, at least the majors, because Lewis is right in that I'm going to go out and say 90+% of freight carrier and haulers, independent operators, and it's hard to reach them. It's one thing for Lewis to be able to touch, a hauler like UPS and to promote behavioral changes in a certain area, and it happens. But, if we're working in an area like District 7 where there's thousands of independent carriers, the likelihood of us reaching 30% of them is slim to none. But the likelihood of a GPS reaching them is more or less 100%, particularly for the new drivers coming into Baltimore City and transporting out to Baltimore County and vice versa. So that was the big miss for me with Baltimore City. We put a whole lot of work into it, really good minds at the table, and not getting that system or getting this map uploaded in the GPS was the real tough pill to swallow, especially when it came down to supporting enforcement thereafter. So we never got our opportunity to encourage behavioral changes, and instead we went right to enforcement.
Joe, I'm glad you brought up a couple of points, and I'd like to make just 2 quick points. One, that the GPSs are fine as long as the independents are using a truck GPS and not a car GPS. Car GPS isn't going to help them. And 2, I'm so glad that you brought up that turnaround at the Key Bridge. And I hope you join with Council 7 and our state delegation to get that done and toll-free, and that would relieve pressure on us tremendously.
Lewis, how long have we collectively been fighting that? I've got an example for you on the other side of the Old Harbor Tunnel at Keith Avenue. We were able to get a reduction at the state level for tolls as an axle count. But Lewis, how long have we been working on?
Yeah, so we have the same reduction in both of those places that Jeff and I worked on, and now that's been almost 10 years ago. But you're absolutely right. Jeff's absolutely right. Ron's absolutely right. And every time the bill gets introduced by your state delegation, I know that's been big with Senator Salling, with Delegate, Robin Grammer. And we always support that. And in fact, we brought out, I know the city council or county councilman has come out and supported that. And there's got to be a way to really push back. We've had Trade Point Atlantic as well supporting that effort. And yet, we actually did an analysis several years ago, Jeff and I, of our members about what level of toll would result in what transition of truck traffic from existing local routes onto the toll roads. And that got the reduction to $10, but it didn't get it to where it needed to be. Our analysis that we had presented the MDTA with was honestly $1 per axle toll, so a $5 toll maximum would have a huge impact on behavior. But ultimately, that turnaround, it's hard to justify going through that turnaround when you're not running over the Key Bridge and paying even a $10 toll. So in as much as we can keep that pressure at the state level, I think that has a meaningful impact.
It absolutely
Thanks,
does.
Lewis. I want to keep this on target because we're at 3:45 now, and I want to give the full committee an opportunity to talk about the upcoming meetings and what we should do next. I want to keep in the forefront. We're giving you a lot of information here today, and we need to decide what we need to do as a group to start to move some of the recommendations forward, or decide what recommendations we'd like to move forward. And in the information that we gave you at the first meeting, it clearly outlined 4 things that we need to do: develop a map with the height restriction roads, and develop and implement a process for the vehicle owner to easily contest the issued citations, and develop a process for the owner of the vehicle to identify and transfer the liability, and exempting certain types of vehicles. So knowing that with the background information that we've given you, at this point of the agenda, I'm looking for feedback from the task force on what we should focus on our third task force meeting. Keeping in mind that we have a preliminary report due in March. This is where we have open discussion, back and forth.
So I'm just going to jump in now in the silence, even though I've said a lot already. I think working on the map that clearly defines the routes that they should be on would be very useful, particularly in as much as we might be able to synchronize it with Baltimore City. The other thing that I think would be really possibly useful is that, you know, in District 1, I know Benson Avenue seems to be that priority hotspot. So if you were going to place a camera at Benson Avenue, I think it's pretty obvious where you would want to put that placement. But in District 7, where there are several locations that have, you know, at least there's 2 or 3 locations, you know, looking and saying, okay, if we had a camera here, could it potentially resolve the challenges on one or more of these key priority areas where we're having a problem? I know I think I saw Belclair on there. I saw, oh my gosh, you know, some of the roads that are all connected around Broning Highway, Dundalk, Delvale, right, and everything there, and how that interconnectivity works. So maybe looking at where there might be options to address a number of those areas with a single placement might be useful to understand. So.
Okay, I got to check and make sure that part of our recommendation is placement of the cameras, because I'm not sure that that's part of the recommendation of this task force. I know that we are supposed to provide a map, and but I don't know, and make a recommendation on the type of cameras, but I'm not sure that placement of the cameras is part of our mission.
You might be right about that, DeAndrea. I'd have to look back, actually. I think you are correct. I think it talks about establishing a limit on the number of cameras. I know that's going to be done through the county council or through ultimately some local legislation, but at least I think it might be a call for a recommendation as to the number and not the placement, but understanding what might make sense from a placement area might give us a better perspective on what an appropriate number of cameras might be.
And I'm happy to go over that with you too, Lewis. I'd like to keep the pressure on for Council 7. We need some relief.
Okay, so we're going to keep it, but we're going to keep this focus on what our sections of the task force has asked to be put in place to do. I think that I could also assist by bringing our GIS person in to see how we can possibly get those maps uploaded to GPS. I know we have a relationship with Waze. I don't know what type of relationship, but our GIS person may be helpful to give us some feedback on how we can present these maps in a different order than just using Lewis to give them the information. So that may be helpful to achieve one of our goals as well.
DeAndrea, this is Jeff. I think it's a great idea because at the city level, our previous director of the Department of Transportation said that she had a relationship with Google and that it wouldn't be a problem to have the map to either Google Maps or Waze. And come to find out, it was a very difficult task, apparently. So I'm not
So it
sure
sounds like
exactly
it
what.
may be, yeah, it sounds like it may be good for the next meeting, Joel, for us to have a discussion around what a map should look like
Right.
and how we can make the map readily available to the truckers.
Right.
Hello, Miss Walker.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Captain Brown again. I know I'm a little late in the game here because it's my first meeting. I know there's some other things were talked about at the last meeting, but are these cameras going to be moved around from location to location, kind of like the automated cameras are now that we currently oversee in Baltimore County? Is that the
So
plan, or we're not sure yet?
we're not sure yet. We're not sure. We're supposed to make a recommendation on cameras to the council.
Okay, yeah.
Is that correct, Joel?
Okay, yes, because my unit here oversees all the automated enforcement already that exists in the county. So we know that sometimes the just the oversight and to make sure it's done right is sometimes where the tough part is. So I think another thing is making sure when, as much as we talk about areas and maps, putting the cameras exactly at the right place is going to be key here, because I think of Salers Point Road between what is it? It's Halliburton and Daleville. That's an area that we keep dealing with, and if you, depending on where you put them, is depending on how effective they're going to be, and is it going to include a local delivery as opposed to somebody that really is cutting through. So that's a couple questions I have, and the camera, or the question somebody had earlier, as far as not obeying the actual signage that says not over 3/4 ton, it's $90 and 1 point. Now, if there's more of an extensive analysis on that particular vehicle, it can then lead to more fines with regard to weight limits and all that, as far as the through trucks. So the fines on the from the cameras that would be civil would probably be pretty effective, I would think. And another thing is, a lot of these maps, are they going to be something we can, is sent to us so I can view them at another time, you think, or?
Yes, everything I showed today, I'm going to send to everyone here.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Just to jump in for the captain's information. So in Baltimore City, Captain, they do have the ability to move the cameras. They're limited on the number to 6, but they're allowed to be mobile. They just have to publish the locations where they are.
Right, because currently in Baltimore County, we have multiple locations, but we don't have a camera for every location. And what I mean by that is it's speed cameras for schools. And we have to publish where the locations are. Like, we just added 5 new ones in the last month, but it doesn't mean that there's a camera in every location per se. It could be there's one camera there this week, and in the next, 3 weeks from now, they may not be there. So it looks like with this program, there's not going to be near as many locations as we currently have with the other automated. So I guess more to come on that.
Yeah. So I think, Joe, for the next meeting, maybe the primary focus should be around the map and the signage. Because I think if we know where we know where the hot spots are, I don't think that we have truck routes in Baltimore County. I think SHA has designated truck routes. I don't think that Baltimore County has designated truck routes. We have designated no through truck routes. So I think that's a lot of conversation that we need to decide if that's going to help us with the map, if we have truck routes, which I think may be new. I need to talk to Greg and those, but I think that may be new for Baltimore County and what that would look like if we chose to put that on a map. And I think having some feedback about the relationships with the GPS Waze folks may be helpful to move the process along. And then once we have the map, then I think you can move to the next part about the cameras and the citation process, which is 2 major lifts at that point. That would be my suggestion, and I would be looking for suggestions from the rest of the committee.
I am very interested in signage and how we can get the state to cooperate with the county, because there are going to be some intersections or some portions of state roads that need to be involved.
Okay, that's helpful.
I like your plan of attack, DeAndrea, as a process. So
Okay, so why don't we work out, if it works for you all, why don't we do a draft agenda for the next meeting? If you all have suggestions between now and next week on what you would like a presentation on or would like to see at the next task force meeting, if you can email Joel, that will be great, but we'll try to come up with an agenda for the next task force meeting, and so that we can have a fruitful discussion about the map and the signage. Hopefully that works for everybody. Joel, did I miss anything?
I don't think so, but yes, I think sort of flipping what we did and getting the agenda to you guys earlier, so we can sort of start from what materials we have, as opposed to today, where it's sort of brought a lot to the table that I'm going to disseminate. I think getting stuff out to you earlier, now that we have a plan of attack, is going to be helpful.
All right, hearing no further comments, is the task force in agreement to adjourn the meeting until the next time?
All in favor, say aye.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, thanks everybody. I sure do appreciate your feedback today.
Thanks.
See you in 2 minutes, Andrea.
Thank you.
I know, right? I was rushing. I know. See you guys.
See ya.